This is the most insightful video you'll watch today. This guy has worked for a Forbes A-list billionaire for over a year and learned a lot. Even though he signed an NDA, he still hit the streets of Reddit to share his experience and ended up spilling some day-in-the-life secrets of the top 0.1%. Let's listen to him. I was a personal assistant for one of Forbes' 1,000 richest billionaires for almost a year. It was one of the most eye-opening periods of my life, but also one of the loneliest. I did sign a non-disclosure agreement, but I will do my best to answer what I can. So yeah, ask me anything. Question 1. A few things I noticed in my several years hanging out with super wealthy people is this. 1. It's pretty boring to be with them because they are so guarded in everything they talk about. 2. Rich people get a lot of free stuff. And 3. Rich people never wait in line and everything is much more streamlined for them. Did you notice any of this? Sure, I noticed all 3, especially number 1. He never let his guard down, or I should say almost never. Towards the end of my time working with him, I got him to laugh and lighten up about some things. And yes, they do get a lot of free stuff. Whenever we shopped for anything, the sellers are always throwing something in for free. When we were in Europe, he loved going to the pharmacy and having me pick out new products for him to try. I would walk out of there with an entire bag of samples and regular-sized products for free. Question 2. This is probably a dumb question, but how would people know he's mega wealthy? Is he just super well known, or does he dress outrageously lavish every day? You couldn't pick him off the street and think he was super wealthy just like that. He wore designer clothes, but the discreet kind, with no showy labels or logos. Nothing flashy ever. He drove a regular mid-luxury car, customized for him, but still, you wouldn't know it from the outside. And no, he isn't well known unless you're in that line of wealth. They all know each other at the top.
So how did those sellers know to throw free items at him if no one knew he was rich?
The high-end luxury stores knew him, and they knew his name when he wasn't accompanying me. They were always trying to sell me the newest collection, and I would be blunt and tell them it was ugly and wasn't interested in buying it. All his clothes looked the same. I tried to spice it up a bit. It made him buy an outrageous coat costing $15K. He surprisingly wore it once, but then retired it for being too flashy. It was a simple brown suede coat with plush lining on the inside, and that was too much for him. That's the kind of guy he was. Wow. Do these rich people have good relationships with their own family? Because I used to know someone who was a PA for a CEO. He is a millionaire, but in no way an uber-wealthy person. His wife would only really be able to contact him through his PA, and he rarely has time for his children. Is it common among rich people who presumably are busy businessmen? My boss had an excellent relationship with his youngest daughter. It was so nice to watch him light up when we would visit her. She was attending university in a different country. However, he didn't speak to his wife. I think I saw them exchange a word once when on vacation together. Why is that so? How would you describe his relationship to his wife? His relationship with his wife felt cold and loveless. It was an arranged marriage, but he always said it wouldn't be professional to go with other women, and he didn't believe in having more wives like others in his culture. He felt it would cheapen his image. But did this man see other women? You know, being super rich and loveless gives a lot of new opportunities. He met up with a female friend briefly once. I was present and served them key. Nothing crazy or weird, it just felt like two old friends catching up. That was the only time I saw him speak to a woman that wasn't his wife or one of his employees. Question 4. Why was it lonely for you? Well, that was because I was working, or at least on call 24/7. The amount of travel we did meant we were never in the same country for more than a week. When we were in his home country, we would maybe stay for 2 weeks max at a time. I was able to meet up with friends in different countries occasionally, but it was always quick. So I just felt like everyone was living their lives with family and friends, and I was stuck sitting at a separate table by myself in every 5-star restaurant around the world. Also, I could tell how incredibly lonely my boss felt, and I think I absorbed some of that loneliness. Question 5. Why were they traveling that much and lonely? I imagine with that wealth they can do whatever they want. Or were they just stuck in a rut and doing what they had to?
Business. It was always business, meeting with other world leaders and checking in on his real estate. He owned houses in many countries.
Did you at least get to eat some of that 5-star food at the table by yourself?
I did. I ate at so many 5-star hotel restaurants, I was actually sick of it. I once asked if they could make me chicken nuggets and fries, and the waiter looked at me and responded, "We could make a chicken thigh au jus and Gruyere mashed potatoes." He didn't understand. The PAs I've worked with never eaten in the same restaurants as their boss. Why are you sitting at a table alone at a 5-star restaurant? This makes no sense. When he had business dinners, he wanted me to sit at a table close by should he need anything. Or at least that's what he said. I always thought it was to make him look important. On occasion, if he didn't want to eat alone, he'd ask me to come along and sit with him. Question 6. What was the most valuable thing you learned? What would you rather have done better or used while working for him? The most valuable thing I learned is that money doesn't buy happiness. It buys you ease. Ease in knowing that you don't have to think about if you'll have enough to eat tomorrow. Ease in knowing that you can go anywhere at any time. Ease in not worrying about the most trivial things. But ease is not happiness, and also that kind of wealth alienates people. But I also learned that privacy goes a long way. He was a very private man with everything. I would say most people have never heard of him. What was most surprising? For me, it was how wealth doesn't believe in the word no. My boss would always tell me that I couldn't answer his requests with a no or it's not possible. He would tell me that if I thought enough outside the box, I would find the yes answer. Can you give an example of a no that you were able to turn into a yes? One of his children's passports expired while we were abroad on vacation. He asked me to get a new passport sent out to the country we were in by Monday. We also happened to be in a very remote area about an hour's drive from the airport. Mail takes ages to be delivered there, and it was a Saturday. Given I didn't know much about how quick a passport could be made and sent out, I was clueless. He then told me the solution, which was to send his plane's flight attendant to him country on a commercial flight, have the passport done in a day, a Sunday at that, and have her fly back Monday. And that's exactly what happened.
Why would you not have checked the passport before the trip? This should not have happened in the first place.
I was not in charge of his family's affairs, only his. We only found out about the passport when we landed in the country we were traveling to, and they informed us his daughter wouldn't be able to leave if she was allowed to enter. When we left his home country, it was a private airport and a private plane, so they are pretty lax with this stuff. I myself traveled to a country last minute without a visa. He had them add me as part of the crew personnel. I had a crew badge and everything. They held me back and questioned me in a language I didn't speak, but he said a few words to them, they wrote some numbers on my passport, and I was free to enter. I definitely did not feel safe doing this, though. I thought I was going to end up in jail. Question 7. Sorry to say this, but for 4K, that's too much. I mean, that's a lot of work. I have read some posts of some people who worked for the super wealthy here that they seem to earn way more than that. I hope you somehow tried or managed to enjoy a bit of every place you visited, though. I was definitely not paid enough, but I did enjoy every minute of my travels. We always stayed at the top hotels, and I always had a suite and unlimited room service. Some hotels had the nicest pools I've ever seen, and I took advantage even if just for 20 minutes. Plus, I got to see the pyramids of Giza at sunrise before they opened to the public. That was pure magic. Question 8. How did you become a PA? What advice would you give to those wanting to become PAs? I'd been working in the yachting industry at the time. I had just left a previous role when I was contacted by a crew agency requesting a stewardess for a yacht. So off I flew to a different country thinking I was joining a boat. I was on the boat for about a week when the captain told me they were flying me to yet another country to meet the yacht owner. He told me it was pretty standard and that he met all his stewardesses. So the following day I was on my way again and was put up in a hotel for 3 days until I finally met the boss. It was one of the strangest interviews I've ever had. He was very focused on my education background and seemed pleased enough with my etiquette. That same night, I was observing a meeting he was having with some associates at his private golf course. Question 9. You mentioned in another comment how lonely your boss felt. Why do you think he kept living the way he did, which kept him lonely, rather than retire and try literally anything else with his life?
I think I would have to ask him this. He took over his father's company, and I think he felt he needed to follow in his father's footsteps. He was a family man, and while his family was present when he was home and he would have most dinners with them, he also ate alone a lot. Question 11. What sort of typical things would keep you busy during the day? Did the billionaire client ever want to do anything for themselves? Did you meet any other PAs when the billionaires were meeting? How were they? Could you expense crazy things and get away with it? Were you ever tempted to expense something and secretly keep it, like clothes or jewelry? I was waiting for one of these questions. During the day, I was pretty free to do my own thing as long as I had my phone on me, ready to drop whatever I was doing at the drop of a hat. When we were in the home country, I would spend my time at the gym and then the pool, which I had a membership to, thanks to my boss. Yes, he would drive himself when we were in his home country. He enjoyed driving and didn't feel he needed a chauffeur. He did, however, have 2 chauffeurs for his family.
I rarely spoke to other people when attending meetings with my boss. He preferred I didn't chit-chat with anyone we were meeting. I did once sit with the Prince of Monaco's bodyguards, and they were fine as hell but very reserved. 2 Swiss guards, I think it's a thing among the elites. And yes, I was allowed to expense most things except alcohol. Clothing was not an issue. He once had me buy myself a $700 pair of Burberry pants from the flagship store in London. I did, however, ask one particular restaurant I frequented to charge me for their most expensive meal and give me a bottle of wine instead, equivalent to the price. I also covered all my taxi rides with my friends on nights out and paid for a dinner for my closest friend.
Question 11. What is something that you consider unreasonably expensive, even by billionaire levels? By billionaire levels, I would say nothing is too expensive, but for me personally, it's always been bag prices. I don't understand why a handbag needs to cost so much just because it's made by a luxury brand. I had to buy one of his clients' wives a bag as a gift once. I went to the store and took a few photos of different options. He went with a snakeskin $60K bag.
Question 12. Do you think the ultra-wealthy have any respect whatsoever for the rule of law? Do they believe they are subject to it or exempt from it?
I believe my boss had some respect for the law. There were countries he would get nervous traveling to. For example, when we flew to the US, he didn't take his private jet because he didn't like taking it to the States. So we flew commercial and then flew back on his father's plane. Would you fly first class with him when you traveled commercial, or would he seat you in economy? He wanted me in first class with him, but because his executive assistant, who made all the flight arrangements, didn't like me, she told him she wasn't able to get me a first class seat. I ended up in economy for half the flight until he demanded I be brought up to first class. I had actually hit it off with a guy sitting next to me in economy, and we were drinking wine and chatting away when the flight attendant came to get me and tell me to take my stuff to first class. Would you say that living with the masses in economy and life in general is better for meeting the right people to be friends with, date, and marry, as opposed to the elite circles? Absolutely. But in saying that, I would add that it's easier to be friends and date from a similar socioeconomic background as yours. Most of my friends are middle class, and it feels like our friendships are rooted in understanding because they're based on what we experience together. As for dating, it's always fun being treated to things by wealthier individuals, but it wears off quickly. For marriage purposes, I actually ended up with someone from a lower class background, and the money arguments are constant, but that's another story. I know somebody who is a PA and PT for a high net worth, highly ambitious person. The schedule and travel are so grueling that he has quite intelligently hired 2 PA PTs, and they are 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. They just alternate. It wouldn't be possible for one person to survive for long. I agree. His father had 5 PAs and a personal nurse who traveled with him at all times. The PAs would alternate. My boss did want a second PA, and I interviewed many, but he never liked anyone enough.
Question 16. When you filled the post of his PA, were you filling in a post previously vacated by a former PA?
Great question. I actually came in as the second PA, as he already had one. However, she was meant to be lessening her hours of travel with him. Once I was on board, though, she proved quite difficult with me and didn't want to share information about certain things. One time on one of his yachts, I was made to stay in the guest cabin, and she had to sleep in a crew cabin. She was fuming the next day, and when I tried telling her how he liked his pizza cooked, we actually had a special pizza oven on the yacht, she tried to tell me I was wrong. We served her pizza, and my boss instantly told me he wanted it the way I had made it the first time. I'd actually used the wrong cheese when I had made it, and he had loved the saltiness. She quit shortly after.
Question 16. Why didn't he like any of the other PAs? I would have guessed there would be no shortage of applicants, so easy to find someone else too. Has he found a new PA since you left? If so, do you know anything about them or what he thinks about them compared to when you were his PA? Also, you mentioned he still sends you messages sometimes, which I find a little surprising. Would you consider each other friends? Does he want you to come back to work for him, and would you?
Another great question. He was super picky with his immediate surroundings because they represented him. It's hard to explain this, but I'll do my best from what I understood from him. He wanted someone polished at all times. Tattoos of any kind and piercings other than ears were a big no. He also didn't want someone too inexperienced or too young. He wanted someone he could hold a conversation with, someone that had a certain knowledge of things. Many of the potential PAs he interviewed weren't the brightest bulbs. Towards the end, I could tell whether he was going to dislike someone off the bat, and I would sometimes try and give them tips on how to succeed because I desperately wanted another PA so I could get some rest. But ultimately, he wanted someone who could speak multiple languages fluently and interchangeably so that he could practice his favorite language. I believe that he had found new PAs, but from what I gather, they didn't last, say, long. I see the recruitment posts for my position quite often, and I always know it's for him. He did message me once asking if I knew anyone for the role, and I told him I would keep an eye out. He'd said I was perfect. I also found it odd. I would consider him a bit of a friend now, but probably more just an acquaintance. And yes, I think if I offered a return, he wouldn't hesitate to take me back. He might give me hell for it, but he would hire me eventually.
Question 17. How would you say your relationship with him was, and did it evolve into mutual trust, or did you remain furniture? I would say it definitely started as me being furniture, but he warmed up to me toward the end and did share a few stories that surprised me about when he was a teenager attending college. He still sends me messages from time to time to ask how I'm doing and tells me where he is. Question 18. What was your hardest day? Anything that made it feel like the beginning of the end? My hardest day was probably when I still had to work the day after going to the doctor. I was out on antibiotics and steroids, and my boss was nonstop texting me about when I would be back to work. I eventually just gave up trying to rest and went back to work. That and not being able to see my family when I wanted was really hard. We once flew to the city where my dad lived close to, and I was able to see him for 2 hours and grab a few things from his apartment before going back to catch dinner and the plane with my boss. So, that's all, guys. Those were the replies I could take from this thread. But before leaving, OP left one last comment for all who doubt his experiences. Hear him out. This will be my last words here. I've seen a few comments from doubting Thomases about this post, claiming this is all a lie to gain attention. I didn't anticipate the backlash. If you feel what I have to say is fake and didn't come here to ask me anything, please just move along. I came to share my story thinking it would interest some of you. Trying to invalidate my experience only shows me you either haven't actually read all my responses, or you just get a kick out of claiming things are fake for attention. My experience is real, and I don't need to prove myself to anyone. For those of you who have asked great questions, thank you for allowing me to have these conversations with you. It has been nice recollecting all my memories from a time in my life I hold fondly. Thank you guys for watching to the end. Please subscribe to the channel.